To give a bit of context before I start with explaining what happened. My family consists of me, M20, my sister, F24, and my mom and dad. We moved countries when I was 10 years old due to a few legal issues my dad got in, and have lived in the country we are now in ever since. To cut a long story short, my mom became emotionally abusive to me and my sister, which left me with a lot of issues and a warped perspective on dating, marriage, and having children. That brings us to what happened yesterday. It was my grandma's birthday, and they had come to visit us for it, Grandma and Grandpa. Things had been going fine so far, until the topic of what I wanted to do after university came up. I shared my plans of wanting to move to another country and then maybe settling down there or keep moving. That made my grandma ask me about kids, and why I had never dated before. I explained to her my reasons, and she seemed to understand it, or so I thought. Later on, when everyone had a bit to drink, the topic came up again, but with them first focusing on my sister, before it shifted back to me. My grandma asked me, again, whether I was sure I didn't want kids, and I confirmed to her that I didn't. She then went on this sort of rant of how as a man I had to have kids, and I couldn't just play video games all my life. I study game development and have made a few games already which did quite well on Steam. I was getting slowly uncomfortable and tried to change topics, but she didn't stop. It eventually got to a point where she called me dramatic and said I was overreacting and to man up, and how, yes, my mom and dad did have issues, but they still did a good job raising us and deserve grandkids. At this point I kind of lost it, and I told her that me even talking to my parents right now and not planning on cutting them off after I left was already me giving them more than they deserved, and that if she wanted grandkids she should have raised her daughter, my mom, better. From what my mom had told me, my grandma and grandpa had also been pretty shitty parents. I then left to go upstairs and only heard them arguing downstairs. It eventually died down and my grandma and grandpa went back to their hotel, and later on my sister called me to inform me that my grandma had started crying after I had left, and my parents were partially blaming me for it now and wanted me to apologize, but they had called her cause they knew she and I had a really close bond. My sister agreed that I was in the right after my grandma had been so insanely pushy about this topic, when I had made it clear it made me uncomfortable, but I am not sure whether what I said and did was the correct thing to do. So, I wanted to come on here and ask people with no bias whether you all think I overreacted and shouldn't have made my grandma cry, or whether I was in the right to set my boundaries straight.